Is that too loud? I haven't really used one of these things before, so yeah, bear with us. So welcome to Environment 185, or ESLP, Education for Sustainable Living Program. I guess you guys are almost as pumped up as we are. It's been hard to sleep the last few days. So just to briefly tell you, this is the first time that we're holding it in the fall. We're really excited about that, and it's one of the largest student-run programs on campus that I know about. And this is the first time that myself, Lucino, and ISIS, our carpool, have organized it. So yeah, first for all of us. And so just to introduce myself, I'm Lucino. You can call me Luch. About fifth year IDS major, International Development Studies. And basically I'm doing this because I'm really passionate about sustainability and getting engaged with students and getting active. Also, I work for the Challenge course for Outdoor Adventures, so yeah. So I love the natural environment, and so you know, just to try to do something that I think is beneficial to preserve that. And I'd like to introduce the amazing Isis. She can talk for us.
Hi guys. Okay, so my name's Isis, and I'm a second year environmental studies geography major. And unlike Lucina, who has always been passionate about the environment, 2 years ago I couldn't give a crap. I didn't reuse my water bottles, I didn't care about organic food, nothing. And then over the course of this last year, I just learned so much, and here I am today standing before you guys. And it just shows, you know, what you learn can really affect how everything, you know, how your life goes. So for any of you who are nervous or you don't feel like, you know, you're experts on this topic, it's totally fine. You guys will learn a lot in this class and have some great times along the way. So here's Michael Carpool.
Well, for those of you that don't know me, I'm Mike Carpool. I am a senior here, and I'm an economics major, minoring in public policy and environmental studies. I'm really excited to be doing this class with Luch and Isis here. I, like Isis, was not that into the environment a few years ago, but this is the type of thing that's going to affect us as, you know, humans and for all of time, and it's an issue that we need to start dealing with now. And so I'm super excited to be here. I hope you guys are all excited to be here, and I hope that you guys tell all your friends about this and get them all to come. I didn't know about this class until last year when I took it in the spring, and now I'm up here leading it. So if you guys want to get involved on campus, there's many opportunities to do so, and I highly encourage you because, you know, it's a great opportunity.
So we are just going to introduce the class a little bit before our wonderful Scott Sherman is going to take the podium. So, welcome to ESLP. So, as Lucina told you, ESLP is completely student-led, student-run. Over the course of the summer, we got all 10 weeks of speakers. We did outreach that all 122 of you are sitting in class today. We did everything. So, you know, it just shows how amazing students can be when they put their mind to something. And we already introduced ourselves, and you guys are the main reason we're here, to educate you, not us. I mean, we're being educated as well, but to have amazing speakers come in and talk to all of you. So here's a really brief overview of our lecture so you can see who we're having for the next 10 weeks. So Scott Sherman is week 1. He's from the Transformative Action Institute. He's taught classes at UCLA before. I took it, Environment 138. If it's offered again, you should definitely take it. And he works on nonviolence and transformative action, and he'll talk all about that.
And then week 2, we have our D'Artagnan Scorza, who's a UCLA graduate and is currently getting his master's in, I'm not sure about it. He's our regent, and he's going to come with Michael Cox. They They're a very dynamic duo, and they're actually one of the main reasons why I'm here today, because I went to like a workshop by them. It was like back last year when Bill Clinton came to speak. And so they're going to speak on environmental social justice, social equity issues. Then week 3 we have Professor Woodrow Clark, who's really amazing. He helped on the IPCC. He was a co-recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize last year for the IPCC on climate change. And so he's really into students and like student empowerment, and he works all over LA County in different like community colleges working towards clean energy. Next. And then, okay, week 4 we have Tim Poppendrow. He spoke here before. He's the Transportation Planning Manager for Los Angeles County MTA. He's also a UCLA graduate, and he works on sustainable transportation. And we're also going to have Dorothy Lee. It's not up there. She's former co-chair of E3, and so she's also been a big part of sustainable efforts here on campus. And just an example of like somebody who's really engaged in UCLA, and she's now the policy and planning director of the Los Angeles County Bike Coalition. And then Fran Pavley, she's been like environmental champion for like 30 years. She's been California State Assembly, I think, for the last 20, 30 years. She's authored like so many bills that have gotten passed, and just front of like leading our state and you know the nation in like climate change policy. So she's going to come talk to us about environmental policies. I believe AB 32 is one of those. She's really amazing, and she's actually up for state senate. She's basically a shoo-in, we hope. So she's really cool. And then you're going to talk about.
So then week 6, it's going to be a really exciting week. Half the reason you guys are here is to learn about what else is going on UCLA's campus and in Los Angeles. And we're going to have high school students come in from the environmental charter high schools that are in Los Angeles. And so I thought it'd be really cool for you guys to have people younger than you who've already accomplished so much just through the type of school that they went to. We'll also have action research teams. I'm the director of that. If any of you guys are interested in research, it's a great program that we also offer under ESLP, and I'll talk more about that later.
Can you all hear me, by the way? I don't really like microphones. Can you all hear me? Good? Okay, yeah, so next after that, week 7, we have Andy Lipkiss coming out. He is the founder of Tree People. He's a really amazing person. Basically, there were a lot of problems with trees when he was in college, and they were just going to kill like tons and tons of trees, and he ended up like saving them all and starting like this whole nonprofit that's planted close to 1 million trees in Los Angeles. So he's just a great example of a student who got active and like really made a huge difference. Then week 8, we have Jules Dervais and Anna Carter. Jules Dervais is a really great guy. He'll talk about local food. He has a garden in his own home, which is just, I think it's 1 acre in Pasadena, and he grows a ridiculous amount of food there. It's just an example of what he did personally. So that'll be really cool. And then Anna Carter, she's known as the Seed Lady. She does a ton of different work in Watts and helps a lot of like lower income and less fortunate people out. She's just an expert on seed diversity and organic like victory gardens, and really passionate lady. Week 9, we have Richard Bird coming out. Richard Bird is a really progressive green building expert. He makes all his buildings are certified LEED Platinum buildings, but he does them like for like celebrities, and he keeps it really stylish. I think one of the things with the environment today is so many people think that everything is just totally tree hugging and and things like that, but he's a perfect example of his buildings. He doesn't try to make it look really green. He makes it look like any other building, but it is really green. So his whole idea is if you have 2 identical products and one's better for the environment than the other, you choose that one. So that'll be really great.
And then week 10, we have Stacy Malkin and Gabe Brown. Stacy Malkin is the author of Not Just a Pretty Face, The Ugly Side of the Beauty Industry. It's a really eye-opening book, and she's going to be talking about her work with the Environmental Working Group on the Safe Cosmetics campaigns and being aware of what kind of chemicals are in your personal care products. And it's not just makeup, so all of you guys out there, it's deodorant, it's shampoo, it's everything. It's a really great lecture. And then Gabe Brown, she's the founder of Greenopia. I don't know if you guys have seen those skinny green books, and they talk about everything in LA that is green and sustainable and just give you a guide of where to go in LA. And she'll be here and talking about consumer choice and what she has done. So we thought to start out really quickly, we're just going to do an eco footprint. I'm sure a lot of you have done this, but some of you probably haven't. And we're just trying to show you, how it's the entire range of how you live really comes together to make this one eco footprint. And so if you guys could all help us out, we're going to just raise your hand, and we're going to, you'll see, but you raise your hand with one of the answers, and we're going to try and kind of get an average by everyone's individual answers.
Should we ask them how many they think it's going to be?
Yeah, so the outcome is measured in Earths. Obviously, we only have one Earth, but the amount of resources that most people use requires more than one Earth. So on average, how many Earths do you think this class is going to use? 8, 4, 6, 50, 2. Can we agree on any number?
So we can all agree that more than one is.
This is a smart class. Should we do get started? Or,
Get started. Okay. Awesome. So are we going to be a guy or a girl?
So somebody raise their hand, guy or girl? Girl? Okay. First one?
You guys gotta speak up.
Well, it's all going to be great.
You can't see the color. Alright, shirt color? Orange. I like the maroon. It looks brown up there.
Okay.
Oh wait, no.
Just click. No, okay, continue.
Okay, so we're starting out with a blank slate. Let's see how much we can ruin it. Okay, so food information. So somebody raise their hand. How much beef do you eat? None. None. Okay. But do you guys really don't eat? Jackie? Three times a week. Okay, what about poultry? Somebody raise their hand. Twice? Twice a week, okay. Pork? None, no one eats pork. It's not the other white meat.
No one likes bacon anymore?
Okay, fish.
Sushi.
Once a week. And eggs, milk, and dairy. Every day. Get your protein.
Awesome.
Yeah. Okay, so now on to diet. How much food do you guys eat is fresh or packaged? Fresh. Really? In the dorms? No?
So you guys
Pizza?
don't eat processed food here.
Doritos, Pop-Tarts. Half and half? Lower. Yeah, okay. Okay, this one's kind of hard. How far away do you think your food has come from?
If you eat in the dorms, I'm telling you, it's pretty far.
Unless you're going to farmer's market every day, it's very little, occasionally, very little, less.
We eat very little.
What?
Very little is...
Okay, what about your shopping habits? How often do you buy a new clothing, sporting goods, footwear? Every day? Very little? Less? Not much. Less, less, less. Less, less, less? Up? More? More? In the middle, in the middle. More?
All right, a little less, that's enough.
Okay, what about furniture? You guys bring your own mattress to the dorms? No, I didn't think so.
Sure, every year we go through new furniture at least.
Do you guys have the money to buy new furniture every year? I don't. More? Less? More?
I'd say
More?
a little more.
A little more.
Where do you guys get all this money from?
Okay, moving on. Okay, new household appliances. Never. We might save an earth or two with that one. Okay, what about... Pretty often? iPods?
Come on, how many of you got a new iPhone?
Occasionally? Okay. Up, 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 up. Right there. What about books, magazines, newspapers? Include your studying material. Often. A little less, a little less. Okay, how much do you guys recycle? Honestly. A lot?
Working on that.
A little less? Less?
This includes the bombs that go through apartments.
Okay, next. What about plastic recycling? Bottles, cans. But do you guys purchase PCR recycled products? No, I don't think so. Maybe after this class, hopefully. Okay, where do you guys live? Apartment? Multi-story.
That looks about right.
Who doesn't have electricity? Anybody? How many this is kind of skewed, but 45? 5? 7 or more? How about in your dorm room? In your apartment or dorm? 4? 3? Okay. 4. How big is your apartment? Small. Yeah.
I'd say the one.
How many of you live in the dorms? How many of you have a car right now? Right now, not when you're home. 10%? That's not a lot. How many of you travel in somebody's car? 1 to 50?
Ralph's was farther away, it'd probably be
Motorbike. Who has a bike? One?
No motorcycles?
Just one. Not a very high average.
That's probably about average.
One person has a motorcycle.
Oh, they did?
Just one, though.
Pretty sure the median is
It's okay. 15 to 30? Anybody have a Hummer? No. Prius? Prius? Electric? No. Often.
say very often.
It's fine. It's fine. Okay, public transportation. Woo! UCLA transit bus. 5 to 25. Yeah?
Yeah, 1 to 5.
1 to 5, 1 to 5. That's a lot of you. Wow. Who has never ridden the bus, if you dare to raise your hand? First time for everything.
Right to Venice.
Train. LA has a subway? Come on. 0. How many? Who goes home over Christmas, vacations? 4 to 10? 10 to 25? Yeah? Who buys carbon credits when they fly? Who? Yeah, can you guys, I know we're having fun, but can we?
Hey, stop the side chatter if you can. Try to bring it back in. Awesome.
So final result, who said 4.4? So what are you guys' reaction to that? Does it shock you?
All right, so basically what happens is if everyone were to live the same lifestyle as us, given our current population, that is how many planets we would need to sustain that kind of living. That's what this is. It's all resources. So, does that answer your question? Richard, does that answer your question?
Yeah, is it like in a year or like?
It's not really on a time scale. It's just if, yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas if you did this again for somebody in India or Africa, I mean, depending on what their lifestyle is, I'm sure it's going to be a lot less. And I'm sure there's people who it's a lot more when they fly 100 hours and they own 10 cars, so it varies. But is 4.4 sustainable? No. Even if we cut it in half, it wouldn't be sustainable. 2.2? No. I mean, you'd have to really, really change. I mean, that's why we're here, is because 4.4 is not sustainable, and that's our ESLP, Education for Sustainable Living program. So.
Awesome. Cool.
Did we? Yeah.
So this website, it's ecofoot.org. It's really cool if you guys want to do it again for yourselves on a your own individual basis. I'd highly suggest it. And also, if you go to explore scenarios, there's a lot of really great ways to change 4.4, not have it be so high.
I thought you were going to introduce.
Okay, so here we have the lovely Scott Sherman coming to speak to us.
Thanks so much for having me.
It's great to see the energy in this room as they talked about. This is going to be interactive. It's not, I'll tell some stories. I sort of have a reputation as a storyteller, but I also want a lot of audience participation. So I'll start off by talking about education. I went to a wedding in Istanbul recently. I think I used up some earths with all that air travel. But a Turkish friend of mine was getting married. And so I went to her wedding, and a lot of our common friends from college were there. And we started talking about, what do you remember from college? It's been a few years now since I've graduated. I won't talk about how many. But we started saying, what is it that you remember from college? What is it that sticks with you after more than 10 years since you graduated? And I started thinking about that because unfortunately there wasn't a lot. You know, I took an economics class. All I remember is supply and demand. That's about it. You know, I think I remember I read a lot of books. I mean, I don't remember much of the substance. But I'm really interested in what we call appreciative inquiry, which is looking at what have been your best experiences in education at any level. It could be at the university level, could be prior to this, in high school, junior high, elementary school even. So the first thing that I want to do is audience participation is just get together in small groups with the people sitting immediately around you and talk about when is it that education has come alive for you? When you were so inspired, when you were passionate, when you're on fire, when you just love learning, that it's a joy to go to class every day. When has that happened for you, if ever? So talk with the people next to you, and then we'll come back as a group in a couple minutes. Okay, so we're going to come back together now, and we need 3 volunteers along with ISIS who are going to write some of your responses on the board. So do you have any volunteers who want to write on the board? Okay, thanks, Maddie. Okay, so as one more person is coming up, what were some of your responses? What are the times that education has come alive for you? Yes?
3 out of the 4 of us said junior high, 6th grade.
Okay, and why? What was it about that made it really come alive?
It sounded like some really neat social science activities, like history lessons, Japanese warlord type activities.
Okay, Japanese warlord activities. Okay, yeah. So activities, though, getting people engaged. What else did people have? Yeah.
Great teachers. We have a couple of hours classes that we sat on the college and had a couple of teachers that just, they included us in the class. It was a very active class. It wasn't just sitting there lecturing. They made us love to come to class and made it fun.
Exactly. So there's a lot there. A great teacher, an inspirational teacher, someone who engages the students and makes you feel like you're participants, like you're not just sitting there passively following orders, taking notes, and making it fun. I think all of those are really important points. Yes, in the back.
I took a class last year on cheerleaders and social activism, and it's so funny. And so applicable to my life and to society, and it through a realm that no one would necessarily think.
That's wonderful. So oftentimes when we are learning about subjects that touch our own lives, that are relevant to who we are, we really care about it. I mean, how often have you gone into a class and they assign you some book like Tristram Shandy, I recall, that it didn't speak to me at all. But then something like this, where it comes alive because you say, yes, this speaks to me. That's powerful. What were some of your other responses when education comes alive for you? When is education at its best? Okay, yes?
Like out-of-class experiences, like field trips, things like that, that's a big deal for me.
Yeah. Okay, so experiential education, out-of-class experiences. I'm going to tell you a story later about how I went around the world with 700 college students, and we circumnavigated the globe together, and I'll tell you a little story about that later. But this idea of getting outside the classroom and learning through experience, that's one of the best ways. Yes?
Having small classes where you can really like become a leader in the class itself.
Absolutely. So small classes where you can take initiative as a leader. You know, even though this is a large class, I'm sure the coordinators here are going to try and make this have a small class type of atmosphere. Other types of things. What were some of the other things? Yes?
Opportunities in which you were asked to educate your fellow classmates instead of just being, a passive learner, also having the opportunity to be an educator.
Absolutely. The each one teach one method is the most powerful way of learning. That when you have to teach other people, you get engaged. You are now teaching. You're not just, again, sitting there passively listening to somebody speak at you. Anything else? These are all really good things. Okay. Thank you so much for volunteering. I wanted to have us put this on the board because for me, the most powerful experience that I had in college when this question came up at the wedding was a class that essentially was the equivalent of ESLP. That it was a class where it was relevant to our lives because they talked about things that concerned how we live every day. It was fun. We did field trips, we went on camping trips, we did all kinds of things outside the classroom, film series, very applicable to our lives, all of these things that you said, and most importantly, we brought great visionary speakers and innovators, people who are out there on the front lines saving the planet. And that's exactly what ESLP is going to do over the next 9 weeks. This is a class that combines the best of education. As the coordinators talked about, this is a class for you to become leaders, for you to become engaged and become active, not just sitting here listening to me or to anyone else. So I'm going to have some more opportunities for us to engage with each other in a few minutes. But first I want to tell you some stories about some visionaries that I had a chance to meet through my education. And all of these started as young people, just like all of us in this room. I like to include myself as a young person. The first one is a woman named Caroline Casey from Dublin, Ireland. And Caroline has an amazing story. You can look her up on, there are videos on YouTube. Don't do it right now. You can do that after class. But Caroline, when she was 15 years old, she grew up in poverty in Dublin, and she had 3 great dreams in her life. One, she wanted to be an elephant trainer. Now, there aren't a lot of elephants in Dublin, Ireland, but you can dream. Then her second one was she wanted to be a race car driver. And then the third one, this was an ambitious young woman, she wanted to run her own business. So then, a couple of years later, she's 17 years old now, and she goes to take her driver's test, and just before she goes to her driver's test, they stop by the doctor, and the doctor is there, and he says to them, "Where are you going?" And she says, I'm going for my driver's test. And the doctor turns to her mother and says, "You've never told her?" And Caroline says, "Told me what?" She was blind. And she never knew she was blind. Her parents never told her in the first 17 years of life that she was blind because they didn't want her to limit her options. Now, she was not completely blind, but under the law, she's legally blind. She could see about 3 feet in front of her. She could see fuzzy shapes or whatever. And as she said, she just thought that's how everybody lived their lives. She was really bad at sports, but she just thought she was clumsy and uncoordinated. When she would go to the restroom, this is how she talks about it. She'd look at people, women, or just people, to see if they were big in the chest area, and if they were, she'd follow them into that bathroom, because she figured that must be the women's bathroom. when she'd go to a dance with her friends, she'd say, and I can't really do an Irish brogue, so pardon me this, she'd say like, oh, is that guy good looking? And the friends would say, oh yeah, he is, and then she'd end up making out with the guy and say, that guy was not good looking. And so here she was at age 17, she finds out that she's legally blind, but she wanted to deny that because she did not want to be defined as quote unquote disabled. Because what do we think about? They're just the term disability. In Caroline's words, that implies pity or charity or dependency. She didn't like that term disabled or disability. So she decided, I can do what everyone else can do. Nobody is going to limit me. So she went to the university and she studied archaeology, and when she graduated, nobody would hire her to excavate anything because she couldn't see the dinosaur bones or the remains of ancient civilizations that she was digging up. So then she wanted to scuba dive, but they say, well, you really need to see to be able to scuba dive. So she learned sailing instead. And then instead of becoming an archaeologist, she became a masseuse, because she said you don't need bloody eyesight to massage someone. And then she decided she'd go to business school. And she goes to business school and she becomes a professor. She starts teaching other people in business school. And people come up to her and say, you are an amazing teacher, and they're astonished. And she says, why wouldn't I be an amazing teacher? Is it because I'm visually impaired? Does it not mean that I can't be talented? I can't be clever? So she ended up, after business school, going to work for Accenture, one of the leading businesses in the world. But she never told them that she was blind. And so effectively, these couple of years that she's working for this company, and she never tells them that she can't see. And so she's bumping into things and whatever, and they just say, oh, Caroline's clumsy. And after a couple of years, her vision had deteriorated to where she was almost absolutely completely blind now. And so she had to tell them, because she couldn't fake it any longer. And so they sent her to see the eye specialist, and the eye specialist says, look, you know the issue with your eyesight. I don't have to tell you that. But I do have to tell you something else. The problem is your attitude. And she says, why? I think my attitude's great. I try to overcome every obstacle in my way. And the doctor said, no. Problem is you're living a lie. You are trying to live in denial. Do you really even love your job? Do you love what you do, or are you just doing it because you think it's socially acceptable and this is a prestigious thing that people who have perfect eyesight do? And she says that moment broke her heart. Realized she told everyone that she loved what she did, and she didn't. She hated it. It was a lie. Her whole life was a lie. And so if any of you have ever been in a major where your parents said, do this, and you didn't really like it, or if you've ever done anything in your life because you've been forced to do that by other people, and you smile and go along with the crowd, this is what Caroline had been doing. And she had a crisis moment, and she went running along the beach, and because her sight was almost completely gone, she stumbled on a rock and twisted her ankle. And she started bawling, and she said, I can't do this anymore. And she said, what am I going to do with my life? And she thought back to when she was 15 years old, and she said, I'm going to become an elephant trainer. So she decided, yes, I'm going to go to India, and I'm going to ride an elephant across India, 1,400 kilometers, and I'm going to do this while achieving one of my other dreams, which is starting my own business. And this business is to reframe the way we see the disabled. Because as she said, 750 million people in the world have a disability of some sort. And she said, but that truly is the biggest elephant in the room. Because nobody talks about disabilities. And let's see, just by a show of hands, how many people in here have a friend or a relative or someone you know is disabled in some way? I mean, man, look at this. Almost every single one of us has a friend or family member, and yet it's something, as Caroline says, there's no Nelson Mandela for the disabled. There's no Bono who's bringing this to the world's attention and saying we have to do something about disabled people. You know, you can't eradicate disability like we're trying to eradicate hunger and poverty and disease. You know, so in the Millennium Development Goals of the UN, there's nothing about disability. In the Clinton Global Initiative, nothing about disability. In the World Economic Forum, nothing about disability. And she said, I'm going to change that. So as she said, she went, it was going to be a fundraiser for her business to ride across India on this elephant. And she said, the media was like, God love her. A blind girl on an elephant, you know, just a perfect story for the media. And so they got on this and they publicized it. She ended up getting all these contributions from the wealthiest people in Ireland. And now, since that time, not only has she started a very successful business that focuses on business best practices, how businesses can use people without eyesight or people without legs or whatever various other kinds of disabilities, and how, as in Berkeley, where I went to college, we call them differently abled, and how we can realize we can reframe the debate about this. And since that time, Caroline has now achieved her third dream. She was a race car driver in the Malaysian Grand Prix, driving at nearly 200 kilometers per hour. She was in the driver's seat. A guy with no legs was her co-pilot. And as she said, oh, the Malaysians, they love the blood and gore. She was really, they were hoping, I guess, that there was going to be something spectacular. But they did this thing, and she achieved her dreams. And she said, I would rather be a dangerous dreamer than a daydreamer. I want to take these risks to achieve something great with my life and do something important for the world, because you don't need to have eyesight to have a great vision. And so this is what this class is about. It's about asking, what is your vision? What is your great dream and vision for the world? What have you dreamed about when you were 15, or maybe back in junior high school before you were 15? What is that one great thing that you would want to do with your life? Because this class is all about inspiring you to say, you can actually go out and pursue that. This is the amazing thing about sort of the time we're in right now. It's kind of a crazy time, you know. We've got this seeming financial collapse people are talking about. We may have a new Great Depression again. We've got the environmental crisis. We're using 4.4 Earths, and that's in this class where, you know, I would assume a lot of you are much more knowledgeable and much more passionate about environmental issues. But this is an incredible opportunity, because who's going to make the difference? It's the people in this room. So the next thing that I want you to talk about with each other and get into small groups so I can stop talking at you for a minute is, do you have a vision? Do you have something that you're so passionate about that you would love if somebody paid you, or if you went across India on an elephant, then you could raise money? What is your great dream? Maybe you don't know yet, and that's okay, because I wouldn't expect you to know already at this age. But what is it that you love to do? What is it that you're most passionate about? The things that excite you, that if you could get out of bed every morning and say, this is what I do for a living, I do this for free. What is that for you? So talk with just a couple of people, get in groups no larger than 3, and talk about what is it that you love to do. I've got some notes that I want to talk about. But... Okay. Okay, why don't we come back? Why don't we come back to the front? So, hopefully a lot of you sort of know what it is that you're passionate about, what it is that you love. But what do you do then? I want to tell you a second story about two students at Brown University. One, her name's Catherine Shawn. The other is Derek Ellerman. And they were sitting around having dinner, and they were talking about slavery, and they were talking about, you know, the history of slavery in the United States, the history of slavery all over the world. And somebody said to them, well, you know, slavery still exists. And they said, what? And they said, no, and Derek's biracial, and Kat is from South Korea, and they're just like, no, the slavery ended in 1865, and, you know, and what are you talking about? And the person says, no, slavery is still a huge problem in the United States and around the world. There are 200,000 slaves in the United States right now, and estimates of anywhere from 12 to 27 million slaves around the world. And they said, what? We're Brown students. This is an Ivy League school. I've never heard about that. So they started asking other Brown students, and most Brown students were like, I didn't know about that. They started asking some of their Brown professors. A lot of the professors were like, don't know about that. So they started doing research and finding out that it's true. There is human trafficking happening in the United States, mostly for sexual purposes, but all around the world as well. And they said to themselves, what can we do? We're very passionate about these issues. In Derek's family, there had been a history of sexual abuse, sexual assault, sexual violence. And Kat, as I mentioned, was from South Korea. And there had just been an article in the paper in Providence, Rhode Island, where Brown is, about 5 women who had been kidnapped and sold into slavery and were working as sex slaves in Providence, right near Brown University. So for both of them, it was a very personal issue, and they wanted to do something, but they said, what can we do? We're just college students. We're not lawyers. We're not officers of the law. We're not government officials. What can we do? But then they thought about the Underground Railroad. And they thought about, you know, I'm sure all of you know the story of Harriet Tubman. You know, Harriet Tubman had been born into slavery. She escaped. But then when she escaped slavery, she came back 19 times, going into the South to help 300 other people, including her 70-year-old parents, escape from slavery on the Underground Railroad. And she couldn't have done it without the help of a lot of people, both white and black, who provided safe houses. Basically, as Kat and Derek said, there were a lot of ordinary people who did extraordinary things. And why can't we do the same thing? So the day that they graduated from Brown, they got a U-Haul, took the U-Haul from Providence, Rhode Island, down to Washington, D.C., and they set up their own offices of, it's called the Polaris Project, because Polaris is the North Star that guided slaves to freedom on the Underground Railroad. And now they just graduated a few years, they're still in their 20s. Now their award-winning organization is one of the most powerful organizations in the world to end slavery in our time, to end slavery in the 21st century. They have been instrumental in passing legislation, not only through the time in our country. Because, you know, back in the 50s, we had the civil rights movement, started then. In the 60s, we had the women's movement. That was sort of the beginning of the gay, lesbian, bisexual rights movement as well. 60s and 70s, we have the environmental movement. In the 80s and 90s, all over the world, we have the movement for freedom and democracy. You know, when I was in college, I worked against apartheid. We got the University of California to divest from corporations that were dealing in apartheid. And Bishop Desmond Tutu, the Nobel Prize winner, has said that was one of the most instrumental thing in leading to the fall of apartheid, was the fact that students in the United States at places like the University of California put pressure to divest billions of dollars from any corporations that dealt in South Africa. The corporations pulled out, the government started to collapse. And this is not me saying this is Bishop Desmond Tutu, who won the Nobel Peace Prize. But all over the world, the movements for democracy in Poland, in the former Czechoslovakia, in Hungary, all over the world, there have been these movements, and they're all led by young people. They're all led by students. If you look at the women's rights movement, the environmental movement, the civil rights movement, the movement for freedom, you know, in the class that I teach here at UCLA, we have a movie. Film series is a great thing, that we show where a handful of students in Serbia took down one of the bloodiest tyrants of the 20th century through a nonviolent revolution, Slobodan Milosevic. And it was 12 of them started this. We have what, 10 times that number in this room right now? Young people have the energy and the power and the idealism to make a difference. And so what I'm excited in my work, working with social entrepreneurs, working with young people, I teach classes all over the country, I'm amazed to see that your generation, the millennial generation, is about to do something huge. You are on the cusp, we are on the cusp of one of the most amazing times in history, and the thing that gives me great confidence is that I see young people like Derek and Catherine who are rising up and taking leadership and taking power into their own hands and saying, yes, we can make a difference. Because I want to tell you something right now that may be a little shocking to you, which is it doesn't really matter who wins the presidential election. Now, some of you are going to get mad at this, but the fact of the matter is, I mean, obviously I have my preference as to who wins, and obviously it will make a difference in terms of Supreme Court nominations and a number of other things. But who is really going to make the changes? It's all of us. Van Jones, who I think spoke at the ESLP series a few years ago and who's absolutely brilliant, he started an organization called Green for All, which is about starting the green collar economy. Reducing poverty, fixing the economic collapse at the same time we fix the environmental devastation of the world. So go to greenforall.org and you can check out the amazing work that Van's doing. And he says, he's African American, and he says, I'm not waiting for Obama to save me. If he's elected president, we need to save Obama. Because we have to put to rest the great man theory of history. You know, a lot of you have heard about this, and it's called the great man theory because it is usually men. That you study in history a few figures, a few powerful figures, whether it's Napoleon or Churchill or whoever may be, they are the ones who changed history. We don't have time for that anymore. Now it's all about us changing history. It's all about there being a new movement. This is what I call World Change 2.0. Because you all know the Web 1.0 was when we were all just passive recipients of the web. You could go onto the web and you would just read the content that somebody else had written. And as you all know, Web 2.0 is when we're creating the content. We're participating. We're interacting. And so now I think we're in a time of World Change 2.0. This is a time when all of us are going to stop passively sitting back and waiting for some heroes or heroines to save us. This is the time when we open source the movement to change the world. And this is when we get up and we say, we are going to make a difference. So the next thing that I want you to talk to each other about is, what are you going to do? Not just theoretically. What are you going to do? How are you going to use your education here to actually, you started to talk about your dreams and your passions. Let's make it real. In the next few minutes, I want you to start thinking about how could you be a part of this movement to make a difference. Because if any of you think that you can't, come talk to me. I mean, if a blind woman can go across India on an elephant and become a race car driver racing at 200 kilometers an hour, I don't want you to think about the things that you can't do. She loves proving people wrong when they say things are impossible. So in the next few minutes, I want the energy in this room to go through the roof. I want you just to start brainstorming, as crazy as the ideas may seem, what would be your dream of the movement that you would love to see, so that in 10 years, when you're at a wedding, you can say, remember when we were in college, and remember the movement we've started, and look at how the world has changed. So I'd take a few minutes and talk about what are your greatest dreams of what you'd love to see accomplished in this class, in your college career, and in the next 10 years. Okay, why don't we come back, just in the interest of time. So, like I said, the 50s was the civil rights movement, the beginning of the civil rights movement. The 60s was the start of the women's movement. 70s, the environmental movement, the gay, lesbian, bisexual rights movement. 80s and 90s, the movement for freedom and democracy. Well, what's the millennial generation? What's the movement that everybody's going to look at in a few years and say the millennials did this? What is it? What were some of the things? Climate change, absolutely. What else might it be? Community. We need a community revolution. Anything else? Food. What was that? Equality. Healthcare. There are a lot of things we need to work on in this generation. So I want to tell you just one more story, because I'm a storyteller. And this one's a bit longer, but I think you'll find it amusing. So I mentioned that I went around the world with 700 college students. You may have heard of this program. It's called Semester at Sea. Any of you can go on this. UCLA students can go around the world. And you get college credit. Actually, it's sponsored by the University of Virginia, and Gene Block, our chancellor here at UCLA, was one of the biggest proponents of this program. So UCLA students can get credit for sailing on a ship around the world, taking classes and stopping in 10 countries. So it's really an amazing thing. So we were sailing from Brazil to South Africa. I was a professor on sailing from Brazil to South Africa. And this big, muscular, white guy with a shaved head comes up to me and he says, "Scott Sherman, I want to talk to you." And I'm like, "That's why I'm here. Okay, sit down, let's have a chat." So I'm wondering about this guy. He's completely shaved his head, big guy. And he says to me, "So, you know about my grandmother's death?" And I'm like, "What? I just met you. I didn't know. I'm really sorry, but no, I had no idea." And he says, "You know." And I started thinking, oh my goodness, this guy's so narcissistic. He thinks, everybody knows about his business. I've just met him. And so, I do a lot of improv. For those of you who saw me speak here last year, who have taken a class with me before, I do a lot of improv. And the first rule of improv is just say yes to everything. So I'm like, oh yeah, of course, yeah, sorry, it slipped my mind. Yeah, sorry about your grandmother. But I had no idea what he's talking about. So then he starts saying, yeah, Grandma Coretta this and Grandma Coretta that. And I'm looking at this white skinhead-looking guy, and I've only heard of one woman in my life named Coretta Scott King, Martin Luther King Jr.'s wife. And she had just died, actually, the previous week. And I looked at this guy and I said, your grandmother is Coretta Scott King, one of the greatest figures of the civil rights movement? He says, yeah, as if this is totally natural. And I'm just like, whoa, this is wild. And then he starts telling me how, yeah, they were going to have him leave the ship in Brazil, and he was going to fly up to Atlanta for the funeral, and, you know, President Clinton was going to speak, and then he was going to speak, and then President Bush was going to speak. And I'm looking at this kid going, this is wild. And then he starts telling me about the time Osama bin Laden tried to kill him. And I said, oh my goodness, I get it. He's a pathological liar. This is so exciting. I've never met a pathological liar. This is really fun. It's very entertaining. So I'm just doing the improv thing going, yeah, tell me more. I'm writing a book about this, yeah. And so he keeps telling me these wild stories, and then he says, so you probably wondered why I wanted to talk to you. I said, well, it did cross my mind. And he said, because when we get to South Africa, you're going to get me a meeting with Nelson Mandela. And I'm like, of course, Nellie and I, great friends, you know. I just think this is really bizarre here. But of course, I'm just like, oh, yeah, you know. And he's like, how will we get in contact with Nelson Mandela? We're in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. I said, let's send him an email. There's a satellite connection somewhere, you know. We can send him an email from the middle of the Atlantic. Let's send Nelson Mandela. I'm just joking. But he's like, yes, we'll send Nelson Mandela an email. So he opens up his computer. He's got a laptop just like I do. And you know, a lot of screensavers, you know, you can put your own picture there. And on his desktop, the picture is a photograph of him with Coretta Scott King, Stevie Wonder, and Oprah Winfrey. And I said, oh my goodness, this is a pathological liar who's really good at Photoshop. This is amazing. This is wild. Oh, so we went onto the internet through a satellite connection. We found the Nelson Mandela Foundation, and it turns out, you know, there's an email address. So we figure, hey, we'll send it. Why not? Got to take risks. So we wait for a couple of days as we're sailing to South Africa, and a few days later, we get an email back saying, sorry, good luck, you know, but Nelson Mandela's retired from public life, can't meet with you, but thanks for the inquiry. It's written by his secretary. So this guy, his name's Nick, he won't take no for an answer. So he figures Scott was a waste of time. Scott didn't get me any closer. But there was a guy on the ship, one of the other professors, who had been in prison, a political prisoner in South Africa with Nelson Mandela. I don't know why he didn't ask that guy first. I don't know why he thought so he goes to him and he says, do you know Nelson Mandela? And the guy says, of course, I hate that guy. And we're both shocked. And Nick says, oh, I thought you could get us a meeting with him. And the guy's like, no, Nelson and I hate each other. You know, we were prisoners together at Robben Island, but no, we don't get along anymore because I'm really anti-globalization. And when Nelson Mandela became president of South Africa, he did this total pro-corporate, pro-globalization agenda. We don't get along. So Nick says, we want to meet him. How are we going to do it? See, Nick won't take no for an answer. And so the guy says, well, when we dock in Cape Town, you know, the Archbishop of Cape Town is really good friends with Nelson Mandela. Maybe if you talk to him, he could hook you up. So we're like, great. We'll go talk to the Archbishop. So we arrive in Cape Town, and my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, was waiting for us there. She couldn't come on the whole trip around the world, so she had flown out from Los Angeles all the way to Cape Town, South Africa to meet the ship. We were going to have a romantic week together. It was both Valentine's Day and my wife's birthday, and we were going to have this romantic week together, and then she was going to fly back, and we were going to sail to India. So she's waiting for us at the dock, and we get out, and I say, Nick, I'd like you to introduce you to my girlfriend. And he's like, no time, we got to go see the Archbishop. So I'm like, come on. And so, my girlfriend and I are running after Nick, and we jump in a cab, and Nick says, take us to the Archbishop. And the guy starts driving. So, and I'm thinking we're going to go to, maybe some cathedral, the Anglican Cathedral in Cape Town. But instead, the cab driver took us to the Archbishop's house, which is like this giant mansion in the Bel Air of Cape Town. I mean, it's like this gorgeous, spectacular mansion with this big gate in front of it, because obviously they don't want stragglers, off a ship coming and knocking on the door. So the cab driver pushes the intercom, and he says, I have 3 Americans here to see the Archbishop. And the secretary responds, I have no notice of a meeting between the Archbishop and any Americans. Send them away. But again, Nick refused to take no for an answer. And he said to the cab driver, wait. And he pushed the intercom, and he said to the secretary, if you give us just 5 minutes of the Archbishop's time, I am sure he will be so grateful to you. And the gates open up. And we drive in, and we go, and Nick gets out, and he starts telling the secretary all about what we're doing, and that he's the grandson of Coretta Scott King, and she's looking at him and laughing, and he starts telling about Bush and Clinton and Osama bin Laden and all this, and she's really kind of laughing now, and meanwhile my girlfriend's just who is this guy? And so we're waiting there 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and our cab meter is running. And she says, that's an expensive cab fare. I have to admit, the Archbishop's not even here. I just wanted to hear what you had to say. But I can schedule a meeting with you with the Archbishop later in the week. And Nick says, again, won't take no for an answer. He says, we're only here for 1 week. And so the administrative assistant says, oh gosh, that's a shame. And he says, and the whole reason we wanted to meet with the Archbishop is because we wanted the Archbishop to connect us with Mandela. And she said, oh, why didn't you say so in the first place? Why don't I just give you Mandela's number and you call him up directly? So she goes through her Rolodex and she says, do you want his home number, his cell number, his office? We're like, we'll take all 3. So she writes them down, and we're about to leave, and she's like, as long as you're here, would you like Bishop Tutu's number? He also won the Nobel Peace Prize for fighting apartheid. Would you like to meet with him? We're like, yeah. So she gives us that number. We're about to leave, and she says, would you like to meet with Mbeki? We're like, excuse us? She's like, the president of South Africa, who just last week actually resigned. And we're like, yeah. And she's like, he's got a summer home around the corner. Maybe you can stop in. We're like, okay, and she gives us that number as well. So I'm just like, this is amazing. So still, my girlfriend is just like, this is really bizarre. I've just traveled 24 hours to get here. What's going on? Is this the Twilight Zone? So, and we had booked this romantic rendezvous at a B&B in southern South Africa. And so I'm just like, maybe we should cancel the plans. Nick's got all these numbers. He's going to call these people. We could get meetings. And Allison says, look, if Nick gets any of the meetings, he can call us up. We'll cancel our romantic week together. And we'll go, sit in with Nelson Mandela or Mbeki or Tutu, whatever. And I'm like, okay, so Nick, when you get any of these meetings, call us up. And we never heard from him again. And after I dropped Allison off at the airport and I got back on the ship and we took off on our way to India, I ran into Nick and I'm like, Nick, what happened? And I'm thinking, he just blew me off. I'm just a professor, Once he realized I couldn't get him any closer to Mandela, why would he want me and my girlfriend to sit in on this one-on-one meeting? But he says, I am so embarrassed. I'm so mortified. That night, I was so stoked that we got all these numbers that I went drinking with a bunch of the kids from the ship, and I lost all the numbers in the bar. So you can just imagine somebody, in the bar comes across these numbers and says, I'm going to make a drunk call here. Who's this number, And even though the story ends anticlimactically, I asked Nick, I said, why didn't you just go back to the secretary and say, I lost the numbers, could I get them back? And he said, because if she asked me what happened to the numbers, I'd have to tell her the truth because I'm a Quaker and I'm sworn always to tell the truth. So this guy that I thought was a pathological liar, turned out all of his stories were true. And I did research on him, found out that he had been adopted by Coretta Scott King in the last few years of her life because Martin Luther King III just had a baby this year. But until this year, none of the 4 King children had ever gotten married or had children. So Coretta Scott King, up to the time of her death, had no blood relative grandchildren. So in the last few years of her life, she adopted this young runaway. He had run away from home, and she adopted him and took him in as her own grandchild. And all the other stories, including the Osama bin Laden story, I can tell you about that another time, but we're running out of time here, they all turned out to be true. So what I want to leave you with is, if you think that all the inspirational things that I've been talking about today, or I hope they've been inspiring to you, are impossible, if you think that it's just a fiction to imagine that you could be the person leading this great movement for healthcare, for the environment, for community, for all these things that you talked about, truth is a lot stranger than fiction. The true story of what all of you, all of us, I include myself in this, what all of us are going to accomplish, what we have to accomplish, given the scope of the crisis that we face, that is what inspires me, is that I know is possible. This summer I was teaching at the University of Colorado at a Global Leadership Institute, and my students came from all over the world. They came from Sierra Leone and Rwanda and Kenya and Pakistan and Palestine and India and China and Russia and a ton of other countries. And they were all on fire because they knew. They looked, all we did in the classes, we looked at stories like the 3 that I've told you today, about people who refused to take no for an answer, about people who had a dream and a passion and said, I'm going to be part of that movement. It's a growing movement, it's growing into a tsunami wave, and we're going to be on the crest of that wave. And I told them these stories, and all of them were saying, we can do it too. And each one of them came up with a proposal. And then we got the wealthiest people from the Denver and Boulder community to come into a room with these students, and these students pitched their ideas for changing the world. And they got lots of money from the people in the room who are like, we want to help you make this happen. So the last story I want to end with is of this one young man from Rwanda. His name is Emmanuel Tombe, who he lived through the genocide in Rwanda. He lost a lot of family members in the genocide. And he's very soft-spoken. He's very gentle in his speech. And he talked about what it is that he wants to do with his life. And he says in this very gentle way, if I can just save one life, then it will be all worth it. So who here wants to stand with me? And he says this to this room full of these influential and wealthy people. But I'll do the same thing. I'll stand in for Emmanuel right now and say, who wants to stand with me and stand with Emmanuel in saying, yes, we can do it. We are going to be part of the movement that can save a life, maybe save many lives. If you can stand with me now, because we are the ones who are going to do it. So stand with me now if you're one of those who's going to change the world. Okay, give yourselves a hand. Thank you.
Woo, Scott Sherman, thank you.
That was awesome. Yeah, I think that was really amazing. Can we get just one more round of applause for Scott Sherman? That was great. We still have some time left. Did anyone have any questions? For Scott?
Syllabus, course stuff,
Question about anything,
speakers.
life in general, what it all means? We're gonna get to that week 5. No. Yeah? So I just wanted something that I was thinking about when Scott was speaking, and it was a moment when he said something about University of California students and the women's movement, right? The part-time, yeah. And just when he said that, I got like these goosebumps like all over me, and I was just like, I don't know, I just had this feeling that like, wow, like it just really rang true, like that's something that, you know, that we can do, and I feel like, especially here in UCLA with such a big, huge campus, I just feel like we have a lot of potential, and I'm just really excited about everything that he said about all you guys being here, so I just want to share that.
And I just want to say, like, everything that Scott said about students making change, I mean, we are direct examples of that, and each one of you can be another direct example. If you guys want to get involved with us, feel free to come talk to us anytime. And, you know, we know a lot of people. I mean, Carpel knows everybody. So, you know, connections, what Scott was talking about, like, the more people you know and the more resources you can combine, the greater things you can achieve. And so talking and doing that, we can always help you with that. So thanks for a wonderful first class. I hope you guys all tell your friends.
Yeah, we just also wanted to say, well, obviously, you could, I mean, if this is just for them, basically, just logistical kind of stuff. So there's still some seats here, maybe some people who enrolled didn't show up, but there's still spots available. It's not, you don't have to enroll to show up. Like if you have an interesting speaker that you want to bring for your friends, or your family, whoever, bring them by. We encourage that. And if you guys can try to get here on time, that's what I meant to say. We're going to try to start on time every day. And we're probably going to end a little bit early today, but we're typically going to go to about 4:50. And the other thing I would encourage you, or perhaps challenge you, to do is to try to sit with new people each day, because we're going to do that again. We're going to be talking with people, so try to find some new faces, and maybe if you typically sit in the back, sit in the front, or vice versa, or whatever you want to do. So, and also the film series, but we can also announce that next week because there's 2 weeks for that.
Yeah, we're going to show a preview in case you guys are interested.
Preview right now?
No, next week we're going to show a preview.
Cool. Anything else?
Thanks.